Hello everyone. We are going to dive into talking about utilizing presentation aids or visual aids, as you can see here, in your speeches. Thus far, for the narrative speech and the informative speech, I've asked you not to use them, or if you did, it was on a very sort of minimized basis. Now, for the persuasive presentation, one is actually required. You actually have to use some form of presentation aid. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this effectively, introduce some ideas to you that were kind of covered in your textbook. Your textbook, again, has a really great chapter on visual aids, presentation aids. Check it out, okay? But then there are a few other things I wanted to show you as we dive into this, okay? So I've got a little bit of a different look today going on in the screencast. You're going to see up here in the corner a preview of the next slide. I usually do use presenter view, but today, because I'm going to be showing you something not only in the PowerPoint that I've prepared, I've had to widen the parameters of the screen. So you're going to see a little more today of the screen than you normally do. So don't be weirded out, okay? That is on purpose. So what I want to do is I want to start discussing sort of my rules of visual aids. These are going to be covered in some form or fashion in your textbook, or if you look at anything online about dealing with presentation aids. And by the way, there are tons of references out there. There are even TED Talks on how to not give bad presentations and how to deal with presentation aids in a presentation. So I'm not going to go just horribly long on this, I hope. We'll see. But so over the course of my time teaching, over the course of my experience delivering presentations, there are some rules of visual aids, okay? And the very first one is this, folks. You must prepare for disaster, okay? You may have run into this already in doing your other presentations, but things rarely go exactly as you would expect. They rarely go as you have even planned sometimes, and so you need to make sure that you prepare for disaster. Now, in your persuasive presentation, you have to have a visual aid, okay? So that means that you need to have some sort of backup plan if, you know, let's just say you prepared your PowerPoint or your Google slideshow or your Prezi or whatever new cool app is out there. Then, so my phone just did a weird thing. I don't know what that was. That was very strange. Whatever you're using, have a backup plan. Save it in multiple places. You know, throw it on the Google Drive if you use Google Drive. Save it on the OneDrive, if I think that's what it's called. If you use Microsoft, if you're on an Apple, I'm sure there's an iDrive, something like that. I don't know. If you are presenting on a computer that is not yours, bring it on a flash drive as well as have it saved someplace else. You want to have multiple copies of it because you never know what's going to happen. And one of the things I'm going to cover a little bit later is you need to probably use different types of visual aids as backups, okay? So you need a backup plan or two sometimes, all right? Sometimes, you know, you're sitting there working on it and the power goes out and you've only got 15 minutes till the presentation and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? You know, make sure you have a backup plan or two so that you're still able to present, okay? Here's the deal. If your company that you're working for flies you to Cleveland to deliver an important presentation, and as you're walking to the presentation, you drop your computer and it shatters into a million bazillion little pieces, and there's no way of extricating the visual aid that you prepared, your company is still going to expect you to deliver an effective presentation, okay? Part of the things that I've been a part of are conferences as well. Sometimes you go to a professional conference where other people who do something similar to what you do come together and share ideas or share practices or, you know, talk about this new thing or whatever. And you if you're presenting and you're there to do that, and people are there in your hotel conference room, because that's always what it is a hotel conference room. You're expected to present. You're in the program and you must present, okay? So prepare for disaster. Be ready to go so that you actually know what to do. So I'll talk about some ideas of backup plans when we get to types of VAs, okay? So prepare for disaster is my first rule. My second rule is do not rely on it for your speech. You must be able to speak without it. I just said that. but you must be able to deliver a good presentation if it crashes, okay? You in front of a room with nothing but the art of rhetoric should be enough, okay? It's an aid, it's a supplement, okay? So it's why it's called a visual aid. If it is the presentation, it's not a visual aid anymore. It's a movie, or it's a visual presentation. It's different, okay? Don't rely on it for your speech. You should be able to speak without it. The speech should be good by itself, and then when you have the visual aid come alongside it, it supplements it, makes it slightly better, okay? Now, thirdly, you have to practice, okay? You absolutely have to practice with the visual aid. Do not delude yourself into thinking that I'll just get my speech together. I'll make sure I can talk through it. I'll throw a few PowerPoint slides up and I'll just kind of click through them as I go. No big deal. No, it will completely throw you off. It is a very different experience presenting with a visual aid of some sort. So you have to get used to the feel of what it's like to change slides. Or if you're going to use an object, which I'll talk about. So in my speech on the importance of carrying a refillable coffee cup instead of using the paper ones every single time you get coffee, then I need to get the feel of, I need to practice picking up my coffee cup and showing it to the audience while I'm speaking, okay? Especially if I've got notes in one hand and I'm trying to deal with this thing. I'm watching myself and how stupid I look. Sorry, it messed me up. So, but you're trying to deal with notes in one hand and your coffee cup in the other. You need to practice setting your notes down and showing this to people, so that you don't play with it or toss it around or anything while you're up there. So you have to get the feel of what it's like to do that. Okay, so my last rule of visual aids, and now these rules are just sort of general things. It's not like they're law, but okay, this one's pretty much law. You must interact with the visual aid. All right, it's not an aid if you ignore it. You absolutely have to interact with the visual aid, and what I mean by that is either physically, verbally, or non-verbally, you have to interact with it. So you have to say something like, "Hey, take a look at this," or "Do what I'm doing right now and bring the stuff that you're saying in as you're saying it. I am interacting with this PowerPoint as I'm speaking with you right now." Well, speaking to a camera that I'm pretending is you. Okay? So you have to interact with the visual aid. If you've got a chart or a graph and there's something you want us to look at, say, "Hey, take a look at this right here." As you can see, and point and direct my attention to, remember, that's how you keep people from getting bored. You direct attention. And so you say, "Hey, take a look at this right here. Yeah, there's other stuff on this slide, but take a look at this right here," okay? And that's how you do that, all right? So make sure you're interacting with the visual aid, verbally, non-verbally, by just pointing at it or saying, "Take a look at this," or "Would you please read this quotation for a quick second?" That's a good thing to do. Put a quotation up on a screen and say, "Please read this quotation." As we ponder this, and then you can move into something and you reference it later or whatever. It's not a visual aid if you ignore it, folks. Okay, do not just throw one slide up on the behind you or whatever with the title of your presentation and expect that to be a visual aid. That's not a visual aid. That's just a slide with the title of your presentation on it. So I guess it aids people in remembering the title of your talk, but you need to interact with it throughout the presentation. Okay, so folks, those are my big four. Okay, my big four rules for dealing with visual aids. Follow them and you will be okay. That's what I try to keep things simple and at a bare minimum for simplicity's sake. And so those four things, if you will follow those, you will be successful dealing with the visual aid, as long as you selected the right type and created something that is visually appealing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about your different types, because most of my students automatically assume, oh, visual aid equals PowerPoint, Prezi, Google Slideshow. And that's perfectly fine. In today's world, that's what I do, because it's convenient, it's easy, and it's effective, okay? So I, with very limited understanding of how to make something look good, can make something look good on a screen, okay? So let's talk about the types of visual aids, all right? I mentioned the coffee cup. You can bring in an object, okay? If you want to utilize an object for a visual aid, by all means do so. It depends on your topic, depends on the context, depends on what you're doing. You know, there are some contexts where an object works, some where it doesn't. It's hard to say yes it works all the time or no it works never. So consider an object. In my speech on refillable coffee cups, I could easily use this. Now, I would not want to use this as my only VA in that speech, because I guarantee you in a speech on refillable coffee mugs, there are amazing statistics on how many paper cups get thrown away every year from coffee consumption, okay? And I'm gonna wanna put those numbers up on a slide or something, which we'll get to, okay? So consider an object. Now, if you're gonna use an object, first of all, understand this, it's rarely used, and it's rarely used especially by itself, okay? I have so many visual aid stories, it's insane. I won't be able to tell them all, but I had a student forget they needed well, it happens all the time. One particular instance, I had a student forget they needed a visual aid for their persuasive speech. This was a student who did not tell me what their topic was going to be or anything. They had not been participating in class. They showed up, and I think they forgot they needed a speech, if I'm honest. But anyways, I literally saw them dig through the trash in the classroom to find an empty soda bottle for the speech that they talked about why you shouldn't consume sugar. And you need more than just an object, okay? The student was kind of proud of themselves. They were like, hey, look, I have an object. And I'm like, okay, but you also talked about calories and you talked about grams of sugar, and that would have made a really good visual aid. So use objects, that's fine. Rarely are they used, and then really rarely are they ever used by themselves, okay? Also, never work with live animals. They do two things. Number one, they are more interesting than you. You cannot compete with an animal. You can't. It is impossible. You absolutely can't do it. I don't care how funny or charismatic you are, the animal upstages you. So number one, they take over the show, and then number two, you lose control. You don't know how they're going to behave. You don't know what's going to happen, and so definitely do not use an animal. Don't do anything with illegal stuff. Please don't do anything like that. Keep the objects reasonable and legal, okay, and professional and appropriate, okay. Next, you can use pictures. Duh. In today's day and age, pictures are everywhere. We have more access than we've ever had to pictures. It's easier to put a picture in a PowerPoint Prezi or Google slideshow than anyone could have ever dreamed, okay? So if you're going to use pictures, by all means do so. This is one of my favorite little comics ever. It sort of shows some of my nerd humor here. But I can use a picture of something like this. This is fine, okay? I can put this up, and maybe it makes everyone laugh, or maybe they're like, what? And in my speech on professionalism at work, this is okay, right? And this picture enhances my presentation. It gives me something to talk about, something to reference, like Worf in the comic, that I showed earlier in the presentation, then the picture really adds to the presentation, right? So you can also use a diagram. Now, a diagram is extremely helpful in explaining something in an interesting way, okay? I'm gonna just hit pause right here and move into the next screencast where I'll pick up right where I'm at.